Hey, and welcome to the highlights of episode number 255 with Lorraine Murphy. Some of my favorite parts of this episode were when she shares with us how exactly we can blend babies and business. I also loved it when she spoke about how to let go of mum guilt once and for all. And I loved it when she introduces the concept of soul on fire work and what that is and why we all need to do it. But there is so much more wisdom and inspiration that you get in the full episode. So to listen to the full podcast and get all the info in the show notes, head on over to melissaambrosini.com/255 right now. Beautiful Lorraine, I am so excited to have you on the show. And not only because you're a dear friend of mine, but because you have so much wisdom to share with us today. But first up, I wanted to talk about your latest book, which is called Baby, You're Remarkable, which is a very honest account and passionate discussion of your experience of becoming a mother whilst also running your own business. So, when I was reading this book, I was thinking about how some women are bursting to be solely a mum. Like that's just what they want. And some women don't want to have children at all and are bursting to create their own business. But then there are some others who desire to have both. So there's like these three categories.
Yes, couldn't agree more.
So for those women who do want to have, like you, and like your book is about, have both the business and the babies, how on earth do we blend them with as much grace as we possibly can? Can you please start there and give us all of your tips and tricks?
Okay, such a good question. And I think the hint is in the question, what you just asked, Melissa, about the blend. So I'm very, very passionate about the fact that I never, ever use the juggle word. I call it the J word. I don't use it because, and I think actually you taught me this years ago, that every word has energy. So when I get up in the morning and if I'm thinking I have to juggle all day long, that just stresses me out no end. Whereas when I think that actually I'm blending my business baby with my real baby, that actually feels achievable to me. Because when I'm speaking to groups of women, I know recently I spoke at an event for 150 women on the Gold Coast in Australia. And what I found was that I asked the question, who here can juggle? And not one woman in the room could juggle. Yet as soon as a woman has a baby and either goes back to work or keeps going with her business, all of a sudden she's expected to juggle. And it's an expectation that isn't placed on men. And it drives me insane. It makes me so mad. So I think for me, when I dial it back and say, okay, I'm not trying to juggle today. I'm not trying to achieve the impossible today. Instead, what I'm actually trying to do is blend Lexi, our beautiful daughter, with my business. And that to me makes it achievable. So it might sound quite superficial, but I think words are everything, particularly the words that we're using ourselves in our own heads and our own brains every single day with those, internal monologues that all of us have every day. So I think when we can change the self-talk and stop trying to set ourselves up to fail with doing this juggle thing and instead approach it as a blend, then that puts it into the realm of, okay, that's achievable.
Like you said, everything has energy. Everything is energy. And I feel like the word juggle has a very different energy to blend. We're expected to juggle when none of us have ever learned how to do that, literally. And, it has this heavier energy that comes with the word. So first of all, I want to encourage everyone listening to be mindful of their dialogue. Are you someone who's constantly saying, oh, the juggle, or oh, the balance, or oh, are you one of those people that's always saying those things? And if so, let's start to be really mindful about our dialogue and say, I'm blending. I'm a blending mum. I have the business and I have the babies and I do my very best to blend. And when I think of the word blend, I actually visualize like a dance, like this elegant dance between the two. And it has such a nicer energy for me personally.
Yeah, it really does. And it's not the tug of war. If you think about juggling, it's like I'm being almost split in two between my career and my family. And it's none of that energy. It's a much more positive energy. And also, as you would have read in the book as well, the whole idea of juggling, it's almost like there's a constant choice that needs to be made between one or the other. Whereas when I think about blending, to me, it's bringing two really precious things because I love my business. I love my career. You do too. It lights us up so much. So I don't see why that should have to get potentially chucked on the floor if I try and fling it up in the air just because now I've had a family, So yeah, there's multiple layers of that blending thing, but I really do believe that successfully blending, and success inverted commas, it's going to be more successful on some days than other days. But I do think that the language, it almost starts and ends with our language, because what we're saying to ourselves internally in our heads every day is what we're then going to go manifest in the real world.
Totally. Okay, so what are your tips and tricks and strategies on blending with as much grace as we possibly can?
I think, I was already quite an organized person before Lexi was born, but when she was born, it just had to be turbocharged organization. So taking the time to do the plan for the week in advance, it's really forced myself and my husband Wade to really get a lot more structured with our own communication. Because in the past, we would say, we used to aim to have a weekly meeting together just to plan out the week and goals and stay on top of our budget and all that kind of thing. And honestly, more often than not, it didn't happen. Whereas now with Lexi, she's a busy, fun, awesome 2 years and 4-month-old. She requires a lot of logistics. So it's just not available to us not to sit down once a week and plan out the next 7 days. So I think for me, being really, really organized, also having that great team around us. So we don't have family support nearby. My family is all on the other side of the world in Ireland. Wade's family is 6 hours drive north of where we are in Sydney. So for us, it's about having the brilliant daycare. Lexi's in a nanny share 1 day a week, which is where she's at right now as I'm recording this chat with you. And it's also building that village around us. There's lots of families like us who don't have family support either. So it's building up that village, and so that you can support them with their families and they can support you as well. So yeah, if I was to summarize into 3, I guess, key pillars, I think one would be getting really, really, well, first of all, changing the language, which we've already discussed in a bit of detail. Second would be getting really organized. And I think the third one is really nurturing that village around you. And I think it just essentially becomes your family. So I think if I was to boil it down to 3 pillars, they would be the 3.
Yes, absolutely. But I wanted to ask you about guilt, because I know people who, we're speaking about those 3 different categories of women. The women that just want to be a mum, the women that just want to do their work, and then the women that want to blend, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I know women that want to be solely a mum, but some still have a little bit of guilt, or they want to be a career woman, but they still have this little bit of doubt. Oh, is this really the right thing for me? And then there's the third category where they are blending, and whenever they're doing one or the other, there's still this guilt that they should be with the other. So can you talk about guilt and the mama guilt, and did that come up for you? And if so, how do you move through it?
Yeah, such a good question. So I think for me, there was, and you've probably had experiences like this before, where someone might just say something offhand in a conversation or on stage or in a book, and it really internalizes with you. And I remember for me, I was speaking at the very first, I know you've had Emma Isaacs on the show already a few months ago as well. And Emma Isaacs, who's the global CEO of Business Chicks, was speaking on stage she was being interviewed at the very first Movers and Breakers conference. And she was asked about mom guilt on stage. And she came back so quickly to the question. And she said, guilt is a wasted emotion that serves no one. And for whatever reason, those exact words just lodged in my brain somewhere. And it's really something that I've come back to again and again and again since we had Lexi. So when we decided to start trying for a baby, I was running my first business, which was a talent agency for social influencers, which I'd been running for, I think, 3 years at that time. So when Lexi finally made her grand entrance into the world, I was running that business. I had been running it for 5 years. I was very excited, very fulfilled by it. And when I was building that business, it was always building it with a view to selling it to a big multinational corporation. I was going to take it to the UK, take it to the US, take it to Asia, grow it to be, multi-million dollar a year global business. And then I was going to sell it. And then at that point, I said, I'm going to do my soul on fire work, which for me is writing, speaking, mentoring. That's like my thing. And the plan was that would be maybe when Lexi turned 8 years old, I'd be at that point by the time I'd earned out the sale and so on. And when she arrived, I went back into the business when she was 3.5 months old. I brought on a business partner while I was pregnant with her, who was running the business while I was on maternity leave. And when I got back into it, it just wasn't lighting me up as much as it used to. And I remember so clearly there was one day where I went to an industry conference because one of my KPIs when I went back into the business was to bring in new clients. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to this industry event. I'm going to reconnect with all my network and get the new clients flying through the business again. And I went to this event, and it was the one day that I really, really missed Lexi. Like at a heart, it's like my heart ached for her. And I went to this event and I was sitting there listening to people. I just wasn't engaged in the event. I was just listening to people speaking to boost their own profile. And I was just sitting there going, what the hell am I doing here? Like, my beautiful baby's at home with her incredible nanny, and I'm sitting here listening to people talk about stuff that I'm just not interested in. And I was pumping for Lexi, and for some reason I hadn't been able to leave milk at home in the fridge for her that morning. So I went into the disabled toilet. I was sitting up on the toilet seat, pumping milk with my little handheld burst pump. And I remember just going, this is so crap. What is the point of all this? And I called her nanny to say the milk is ready. So she left our house, which is maybe a 10-minute drive from the city where I was. And she was driving along one of the main thoroughfares. It was down Elizabeth Street in Sydney City. And I was standing on the edge of the street, and you can't stop on Elizabeth Street. It's like a no stopping zone. So she slowed down. I could see her car approaching. She slowed down to, I think she was doing maybe 10 kilometers per hour. She rolled down the passenger side of the window, and I flung my bottle of milk in the window, and she kept driving. And I just saw Lexi's little toes sticking out the back of her little capsule in the back of the car. And it was just this, I call them God moments. It was a God moment for me of going, what the hell am I doing here? And I left the conference early. I went home to Lexi, and I said to her, if I could put you back in my belly right now, I would. It was like I couldn't physically get close enough to her. And I think that day I didn't realize it was almost like bubbling at an unconscious level. It came up to my conscious in the next 2 weeks. Like, I need to sell this business because I just need to do the soul on fire stuff. Because if I'm going to be spending time away from her, it needs to be delivering maximum ROI, return on investment. And I don't mean that in terms of I need to be making $2,000 an hour for every hour I'm away from her. It needs to be an ROI in terms of my soul. That if I'm going to be spending time away from my beautiful baby, it needs to be to do the stuff that I believe is setting my soul on fire. And that way, then I go back to her and I feel so much more fulfilled and excited, and like I'm on purpose, which means she's on purpose, and the whole family's on purpose, and the business is on purpose, and so on. So this is a very, very long-winded of saying I feel that my mum guilt index drops massively when I'm engaged in stuff that I feel is actually worth my while doing and is actually serving my purpose. The mum guilt goes up when I feel like I'm wasting my time if I'm not with her. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally, babe.
That was a very long answer.
And life is so precious and so sacred. And we only get one opportunity, one go at this. And it's going to have to be really charming to pull you away from the loves of your life, your children and your partner. Like I always say, if it's not a hell yeah, if it's not a full body hell yeah, like every cell in my being just buzzing with excitement, then it's a no thank you for now.
Yeah.
And I think you've made such a huge point that mum guilt, that mum guilt that we feel does dissipate when you are doing things that are lighting you up and you're saying no thank you to the things that you just feel obligated to do. So when you have children at home and you go out to a beautiful lunch with a girlfriend and that lights you up and it's so exciting and you come back as an even better version of yourself, that is worth the hour away from your child.
Absolutely.
And same with work opportunities, the speaking gig, if it's something that you feel so passionate about and lit up about and something that your cells just dance over, and then you go and you're away for your child for one night and you come back. But if it was worth it, then you're going to be the best version of yourself for your husband, for your partner, for your child, for your friends, for your family. You become like the 5 most prominent people in your life.
Yeah.
And so if your 5 friends are negative about the experience of blending babies and business, then you will pick up on that energy. So maybe find some people who don't also subscribe to the mum guilt and who are, wanting to create something a little bit different
Yes. Such a
and
good point.
wanting to raise their vibration
Mm.
and to not sit in that negative, low vibrational energy.
Yeah. And Melissa, as well, that doesn't need to be 4 people that you sit in a room with every month or every week. It can be people online. So I know when I'm having tough days, I just almost need to tune into your Insta stories and I instantly feel uplifted. Like there's so many people like that. My Instagram feed is filled with high vibe people. And I think that's really important. So we don't necessarily, yeah, as I said, need to get that person bodily in a room with us every week. We can actually, and that's the beauty of social media, is that we can tap into these people without them physically being in our space or even knowing that we exist, as crazy as it sounds. So I think that's important
Yeah.
to remember as well. But obviously having some in real life contact with someone who's not necessarily completely making the same choices as you, but definitely is like-minded. And like you say, they've got a drive to create something different. I think and for me, that was really game changing because I did have a few friends, probably 2 or 3 friends who had babies just before me and also had their own businesses. And that was just so helpful for me just to see that someone else was on that path and that they were loving it. They were embracing this newfound mamahood. It wasn't like an inconvenience or something that they found that they had lost themselves in. They were really celebrating it. I think that enabled me and almost in a weird way gave me permission to celebrate it as well because they were. It's like you cannot be what you
Mm.
can't see. So when you see other women who are blending it and who aren't feeling guilty. And for me, Emma Isaacs is a huge role model. When I see her and this what she puts out into the world, it gives me permission and it makes it permissible, but also makes it possible for me to have whatever she's having. If you get me.
Mm. Oh, absolutely. So, what about our partners? We've got babies and business. How do you blend that? Where does that come into the equation, and how do we make a relationship thrive with the babies and with the business and with our partnership as well?
That's such a good question. The last 2 years have been the most intense of our relationship so far. We've been together 10 years next week. So I think for us, it's been a classroom. I would never want to put myself up there as saying we've got the perfect relationship because we haven't. It's been very, very testing over the last couple of years with everything else going on. Plus, you have this beautiful human who I think Lexi probably collects about 100 kisses between the two of us every single day. And that affection for her that used to be sent in each other's direction. So there's multiple shifts happening on multiple levels. So I think for us, something that has helped massively was a day that we spent together between Christmas and New Year last year, where we took ourselves to a beautiful new beach on the northern beaches. Lexi was at daycare, and we spent the whole day visioning where we wanted our lives to be. We planned out our 5-year vision, and funnily enough, we did them individually. So at each step, we had clipboards on the beach. We were that couple. It was hilarious. So
Yeah.
we mapped out our 5-year vision. He did his, I did mine, sitting on each other on different beach towels, and then we compare notes. And it was such a lovely. I think I want to say it was very reassuring. It was very validating that actually where we both want to be in 5 years' time was so similar, like almost mirror images of each other. So I think that was really reassuring that given even the year that we had, that we were still so aligned in terms of where we want to be. And we'd been together, 9 years at that point. So that was really beautiful. I feel what we did at the start of the year is we almost got a lot of the negotiation out of the way at the start of the year so that we could then set up our weeks to help us serve our businesses, serve Lexi, serve each other, serve ourselves individually. So part of the deal is that I would do more of the main caregiver responsibilities than than Wade would. But every Sunday afternoon, I have a couple of hours that I go and do my own thing. So I might go to do yoga, I might get my nails done, I might go catch up with a friend or just lie on the sofa and read a book. So it was getting to that level of detail I feel like that has insured us. And I feel like that planning we did at the start of the year was pivotal for us to be able to not just make it through this year, but also to build the businesses and have this incredible daughter that we get to have as well.
Now, I want to hear, what do you attribute your success to? Because everyone has a different definition of success and yours is unique to Lorraine. But if there's one thing that you could attribute it to, what would it be?
I would probably say, if it's okay, 2 things. I think one is being organized. So I think for me, being organized over the years has really helped. And I think the other one would be tuning into my spiritual side and having that spiritual support team. So for me, I like to see my kinesiologist because it clears any of that negative debris before it actually bubbles up. I think having a spiritual practice has been absolutely life-changing for me. I'm a big fan of meditation, affirmations, tuning into my vision board every morning, seeing my kinesiologist, having my mantras, that to me, it's almost, it's funny. I feel like both being organized and having the spiritual practice provide an infrastructure in my life and enable me to achieve what I've, so thankfully been able to achieve. But they're two very different types of infrastructure, but they feed each other. It's like one provides the machine and one provides the soul.